I'm awake. What? I'm here. Enterprise, yes. Enterprise sucks, right? This is what I'm supposed to say. I'm sorry. This episode's really boring. A lot of these episodes I've had a lot to talk about. I've noticed that. You're probably thinking, why is that relevant? Well, I know some of you seem to think the longer the ruminations, the better, which is an idea I push back against as hard and often as I possibly can, because the length only has to do with one thing, how much I have to talk about. I have a very simple rule, and again, I'm trying to repeat myself more often, since people are asking me to do that, since not everyone watches the full body of my work. So, here's the rule. I talk until I run out of things to talk about. I don't have a minimum length, and I don't have a maximum length. I am just discussing as I go. So, these kind of episodes are the ones that really frustrate me. It's not that bad. There's actually been worse episodes in Season 1 so far. We even had a lamentation. But this episode, I just don't have anything to talk about. And those are the most frustrating for me because that's my job. I know it's hard to understand. So I'm just sitting here like, okay. Now, that being said, I was paying attention for something, and I did notice it, I think. And I'm gonna bring it up front here. For those of you watching these episodes with me, did you notice the crew's performance just kind of got a little flat towards the latter half of the episode? Just, their hearts weren't really in it. Anybody notice that? I think I did, but I have to admit I never have before. But then again, the last time I watched this episode was in 2001 or whenever this episode came out. Wait, no, that's wrong because I wasn't watching this when it came out. When did I watch Enterprise for the first time? It's whenever the DVDs came out. I should look that up at some point to figure it out. It was a while ago. It should have been around 2006-ish, but I'm not actually sure on that, so don't quote me there. Point being, I only watched this episode once, and that was 15-ish years ago. So, my memories here are kind of vague, as we actually already established in the previous episode, which I really liked. What? So 9/11 happened during the filming of this. I was trying to talk around it. Let's just jump into it. 9/11 happened, and they were informed, and the show must go on, so it did. But several people reported that their hearts just weren't in it, and they just couldn't do it anymore. And this was actually mentioned on the behind-the-scenes featurette, which comes with this. So, I'm sorry, I just realized you don't know. I'm gesturing at the Blu-rays here, which I have right here. Because, duh. And yeah, I don't know if that's relevant, but it is something I noticed watching through this. At a certain point, they're just going through the motions. That probably doesn't help the boredom aspect. Another thing that probably doesn't help the boredom aspect is the fact that the episode's kind of dull. So first thing we have is Archer's all bled. Oh, gee, we've got a comet and some stars, whoop-de-crap. Wait, there's a civilization. Holy crap. That's so awesome. Now, I'd make fun, but then I realized that exploring is like video games. Hear me out. I swear I'm going somewhere with this. Do you like video games? There's a pretty good chance you do. Now imagine that they released 3 separate video games, one of which was of a particular type you're interested in, and 2 which are not. It's all still video games, but you're only really going to be excited for one of them. So, Archer so far has seemed to be very much on the soft side of exploration, and more interested in the social side of exploration, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. But it is interesting, considering that he has consistently portrayed that, and thus he would be far more interested. Oh my god, there's a society, and they've got people, and I actually just tried to cover a yawn, because this episode was really, really boring. Our first rumination. So I'm with that, and I kind of like how they lined that up. Thing is, I think this episode would have substantially more impact if the episode right before it had actually been Fight or Flight. As I talked about during that episode should have been shifted later in the season rather than being the second episode of the entire show, in my opinion. This then helps to solidify my opinion on that fact. If the last thing they had just done was encounter hostile aliens and nearly kill them, but then make a friend in the form of the Axanar, cool, that then leading to this being like, aha, which then leads to them rescuing the civilization from another hostile alien species. You could see how this could kind of segue into a mini arc here, and the two would have more impact in those positions, in my opinion. But anywho, so they run through a couple things, and the first part of the episode is actually pretty cool, because they're like, okay, how do we deal with this? What do we do? Who do we contact? I'm listening to all the reports and the things. I'm trying to understand the languages. There are multiple languages. Credit. Very rarely does a species speak multiple languages. You know, all the Klingons speak Klingon. But how many languages do we have here on Earth? So credit where credit is due on that. The next thing they point out is, you know, we should hail them. This is, and by next I mean there's actually several things prior to what I just mentioned. They say, how do we hail them? That's an interesting question. Again, I point to Earth. Who do you hail if you're an alien ship who's arrived at Earth? Who do the Vulcans contact? Right? Because that's a very good question, isn't it? We have many governments representing many different types of people in many areas, which may or may not be considered legitimate based on your opinion about certain things. So who do you hail? And how? It's just kind of a cool little thing that they do with this whole prep phase thing. And, of course, they talk about the first contact protocols, which the Vulcans use, and you humans should do that too. Cough, cough, prime directive, lead up. But, of course, there's a logic to that. You really don't want to just go down and be like, hey, so, yeah, what's up? How are things? We're the Ferengi, and we're here to sell you things. No. Excuse me, let me do my Zek voice. Where's my Beetle stuff? All right, so there we go. Because I can picture just one person saying, do the Zek voice. I'm told they do a good job of it. That wasn't a good impression. I sucked at that. But what doesn't suck is the fact that they don't want to do that. Because, of course, they don't. Cultural contamination is a real concern. That's why they have a phaser shootout in the middle of an area, a crowded, alleyway, I guess, which no one really reacts to with any significance. And they also have no problem telling one of the locals, by the way, we're from space. It's got to be a hell of a pickup line, right? Hey, I've been to space. That's for like 3 of you watching this right now. So, one of the things I do like is they decide to go down out into the farm. Little farming community. Makes sense. If something goes horrifically wrong, it's okay. It's not going to spread all that far, right? I mean, let's be real for a second. If an actual alien named Lore came down right now and was just like, hi, I'm an alien, how many of you would believe that? Now let's add a further layer to that. Let's say an alien came down to a random rural community and was like, hey, and was found out to be an alien and left. And they're like, oh my God, look, we totally proved it. Look, we've got these pictures we took with our phones. It's totally legit, guys. Uh-huh. This is one of the reasons why I find the cultural contamination concept interesting. Because I'm going to demonstrate this in the stupidest way possible, okay? Now, this is, in my opinion, how cultural contamination would happen with a pre-warp society. An industrial pre-warp society, got to clarify that. Because it feels like, depending on the culture and the people and the specific individuals you interact with and how you interact with them and how you reveal yourself, will determine whether or not there is cultural contamination because, oh my God, aliens are real. A Vulcan moment, if you will. Or, flip the coin, and it might be a total non-impact. One of those other little random stories. Remember, within the Star Trek mythos, that is to say within the canon, Amelia Earhart disappearing was just kind of a little anecdote that people raised an eyebrow at. She was literally abducted by aliens. That actually happened. That's something that was covered in the 37s over on Voyager. How much of a cultural impact did that have? Now, I know that's not a great example, because obviously, she just vanished. There were no alien ships who showed up and whatever, but I think, in my opinion, it wouldn't be hard for there to just be a blip and people be like, huh, and then everyone else just kind of moves on, because you couldn't prove anything, we didn't learn anything, so whatever, right? This is why I used the Ferengi as an earlier example, because the Ferengi would be far more likely to just drop down and start being like, all right, hey, we're the Ferengi and we want to sell you stuff. So how are things? And they would deliberately, overtly, invasively, culturally invade the planet rather than what these people are trying to do, which is trying to do everything they can to avoid that. Even the Malurians are trying to avoid that. By the way, ha, on using the Malurians. It's funny how much Enterprise keeps tying into TOS. It's almost like I planned this. But if you don't know who they are, just look up... The Changeling is the name of the episode. The Changeling. The Nomad over on TOS. I had to think about that. I haven't covered TOS yet, obviously. Anyways. So they go down to the city for only one reason. Because they detect a power source down there, which they really shouldn't. It would be as if, aliens showed up around real-life Earth right now and are like, hey, so we found an antimatter reactor. And it's like, oh, that shouldn't be there. So, okay, the plot thickens. Cool. All of this has been pretty legit. Then the episode starts to lose me super quickly, because first of all, they have a universal translator, because of course they do, and I really wish they didn't, and Hoshi's presence on the team means nothing. This could have been a Hoshi episode. Instead, it's an Archer Kissy episode. Right. So I promised myself, I didn't promise, I don't want to lie about that. I told myself that I would try very hard not to make fun of the Romance of the Week plot. So let's just get this out of the way. It's dumb. The first time he kisses her, twice in a row, forces a kiss on her, by the way, he does so in order to cover the fact that his translator broke. Then they kiss towards the end with a really lame line, like straight out of a modern Bond film. And by modern, I mean Pierce Brosnan, which is no longer modern. Dating myself. And there is an utter absence of chemistry between the two. I get the idea. They wanted to kirk it up a little bit. Okay. And we'll see over when we go through TOS how much I feel about the kirking it up approach, because I don't know. But I tend to be against the Romance of the Week for the same general reason I tend to be against the Thread of the Week. Checkbox. Nothing of significance. It is, as I have demonstrated several times on Voyager and Enterprise, TNG, I keep calling TNG Enterprise. On TNG and Voyager, it is possible to do a Romance of the Week and have it mean something. Either relevant to the character, or relevant to the plot, or relevant to the setting. This is just, hey, oh, and by the way, you're female and I'm male, so mwah, mwah, mwah. Now, that's all I'm going to say about that point. Okay? We're done with it. Moving on. So, plot thickens. Archer is a terrible liar. Oh my God, I'm a bad liar. That's a flaw because of the nature of how I express myself. But Archer is just like, my God, what happened to me? You just collapsed. Like, I have to actually act. I have to put into thought acting in order to try and act as badly as he is acting here. It's really quite impressive. So they are really, really bad at improv, just across the board. They're really suspicious. They see people are sick, which is a nice bit of exposition, actually. They try to break in, then she shows up, then they shoot her. Good job, T'Pol. That was exactly what you should do in that circumstance. That's not sarcasm, by the way. T'Pol continues to be competent, and she will be in this episode as well. Then Archer is a terrible liar. They go confront the guy, and they are terrible liars, and he is a much better liar. However, despite the smoothness with which he lies and the tale he comes up with, which actually makes perfect sense, the problem is the power source is simply too strong. But that makes sense. He can't assume what level of tech their scanners are, so ergo, he isn't 100% sure what they know, so his lie is probably the best possible thing for him to fall back on. Okay, with it so far. This then leads to her, trying to figure out what's causing people to be sick, and we find out that the mining equipment has some kind of lubricant which is leaking into the water table, which is causing people to get sick. Okay, all of this lines up pretty clearly, and of course the guy later on doesn't even express any regret at killing off a few thousand people, because why would he? He wants to make weapons, because that's what bad guys do. They make weapons, obviously. Phase pistols are not weapons, don't worry, we're still the good guys. So, this then leads to something interesting. She's like, I've been figuring out that it came from his thing, and I've been here for 18 months. And she points out what is not quite a Voronoi diagram. It's like the beginnings of one. And I wonder if they did that on purpose, since, that would actually be a logical way to deduce her way through this. And she is portrayed throughout the episode as having a brain. Not much of one, but it is a repeated element that she is someone who actually has the ability to think. And is probably one of those ahead of her time types, like most of these people tend to be when this kind of thing happens. Sometimes it's time travel, sometimes it's a less advanced planet, whatever. Either way, I said I wasn't going to comment on the romance again, and I won't, but I do want to mention the two really just have an absence of chemistry. Almost all of the scenes between the two really do not work for me at all. Anywho, so I mentioned the cultural contamination thing here. Aliens, oh my gosh, there's an aliens. And she's just completely nonplussed about this. Like, yeah, okay, aliens. She's so blasé about it. It's actually kind of funny because it's kind of believable, isn't it? For real, if someone you started interacting with was a little suspicious, and you're like, what the heck's going on with them? And you find out they're an alien, how bizarre would you be by that? I don't know about you guys, but I'd just be like, okay. Because, yeah, okay. Right? Pretty sure if zombies showed up or if I found out we're in the Matrix, that wouldn't even be that much of a surprise at this point, because we have fiction as a barrier for the unimaginable. I've talked about that before, but what I haven't talked about before is her response, which is wonderfully human, ironically. You have the ability to visit other stars and see other people. Why visit us? Why are you here? She doesn't say it that way, but that's exactly what I was picturing when she was saying it. Her point is that we're so boring and plain and there's nothing interesting here, which, okay, yeah. But I want you to imagine that Vulcans find Earth, well, I say now as of when I'm recording this, when we're still in the midst of the 2020 pandemic. I have no idea what this is going to be like in whatever month this comes out next year. I have it all in the calendar, but I don't have it memorized right now. And the calendar's down here. It take forever to reach down and grab it. Now I got it. So, when's this episode going? Civilization. This is now May. It's May 25th. Did you know that, guys? Fascinating. I'm in the future. I'm speaking to you from the past. Oh, we're covering Balance of Terror next week. Cool. And Charlie X yesterday. Oh. I have no idea what the pandemic's going like now. But imagine if someone drops down early 2020 and is just like, ooh. Why visit here? First thing they find is the internet, and then they're like, nope, and that's just the end of contact with the Vulcans. Good job, society. I have heard theories, actual, real theories, that that's already happened. I've also heard theories that this is the answer to the paradox, Fermi's paradox, that there are aliens here and they're just hiding with their superior tech. I don't buy that either, but it's just interesting to think about. Anywho's, so they have this huge drilling operation. No wonder it's in the water table. And they have to choose blue or yellow. He insists on blue, she insists on yellow. So they pick blue. Naturally, it's the wrong choice. This then leads to a weird section of the episode where he has a better ship and a better position, and he insists on negotiating. Why? He clearly has no problem killing people, so why is this an issue for him? You could argue that it's because he doesn't want issue with their governments, and I suppose I could see that being valid, but really, he is entirely too willing to negotiate despite having the superior position. Nevertheless, he negotiates, which allows them to get the upper hand. T'Pol once again shows that she is a competent commander by coming up with a strategy to locate the thing, beam it out to the enemy ship, and blow it up on their face. And of course then disable their weapons. Okay, good job, T'Pol. Meanwhile, Tucker is trying to ensure that they vent the plasma from the ship to permanently disable it, just to ensure that they don't leave, and of course, ensuring that they have no possibility of rescuing the captain, the entire reason he's doing this. This is the first time in the show that Tucker's been a moron, and I say that way because I know Sci-Fi Debris, which I actually haven't watched in like a year at this point, but I know he used to make a regular joke of Tucker being a moron. This is the first time I've seen any actual evidence of that on camera, really. This is, every other time where he's been kind of stupid, it's been because he has been deliberately thrust, usually against his will, into a situation he is not familiar with, like when he was piloting that stupid pod back in Broken Bow, for example. That wasn't really his fault, was it? Anyways, so he's a moron. T'Pol's smart. They win. There's a phaser fight. Everyone has a non-reaction. T'Pol uses this brilliant tactic, which utilizes the situation perfectly, and then Rian uses the exact same tactic. I wonder if that was done on purpose. Either way, naturally igniting a lantern of oil causes a grenade to go off, because that's how physics works, and so they're clearly disabled, and their ship is disabled, and so we win! Also, there's a quick reference to Tellarites. To my knowledge, the first reference in the show so far. The episode ends on things that I said I wouldn't talk about. I found myself sitting by and really trying to think, as the episode was winding down, why it wasn't catching my interest at all. And I think the problem is that nothing about the premise, that is to say, no, let me rewind it. Nothing about the encounter, let's go back to that terminology, nothing about the encounter engaged me. There's a hostile alien which has invaded a pre-warp civilization in order to cause it harm for their own self-aggrandizement. Doesn't really sound all that engaging to me. Especially since they're trying to be subtle about it, but at the same time have no trouble doing things that should easily get them caught. If this was something more like, I don't know, V, that would be far more interesting. The aliens, I actually love V, the original miniseries, by the way. I adore the original V. I've watched it several times, including within the last 6 years, which may not sound like recent, but for rewatches for me, that's pretty recent. So, I'm totally down for that, and I'm totally down with that concept. And, of course, the whole, societal argument thing about the Nazi Party taking over, we're walking, or, I guess, goose-stepping. But the point is, that is a similar concept as the one I just described. Hostile force showing up, subverting, taking over for undermining intent. But even a casual glance could tell you how what the Malurians are doing and what the V aliens are doing are completely separate in almost every single way. One is trying to be hidden amongst them in order to hide a giant mining operation. The other one shows right up and says, "Hi, we're aliens and we're friendly." Admittedly, my first knee-jerk thought, and the reason I was thinking of V, is because, well, maybe the Malurians are here openly. Maybe they have contact with the locals. And I was thinking about how that could add wrinkles to the narrative, because if the local government approves of the Malurian presence and doesn't even, let's imagine they're like, well, wait, but they're deceiving you and they're causing this illness. And imagine the government be saying, well, that sucks, but who cares? We're getting a really good stuff out of it. We're getting technological advancement. We're getting access to trade we would never have. We get our first step into the galactic community. I think the loss of a few civilians in a city is worth it. I mean, we could just evacuate. And just imagine all the wind going completely out of Archer's sails as he's like, but they're the bad guys. I think that might have had some value. And that's exactly when I realized I was describing V in my head, and I had to bring up the V comparison. Another thing that might have worked is maybe his story was legit. Maybe he really is someone who is here who decided to go native, but do so on his own terms. Actually have something local that helps him to, stay within the level of comfort he has. I mean, indoor plumbing's kind of nice. That's all I'm saying. So I look at this and I think, well, what's the drama there? Well, then at that point, we could have Archer kind of twisting himself up about the concepts of cultural contamination and alien interaction. You sit here, you're deceiving and lying to these people constantly, day in, day out, just because you happen to like it here. What gives you the right to try and do that on such a large scale? And the guy, of course, is just like, dude, I'm just running a shop, okay? Like, I've got a few commodities in back that are for my own creature comforts, but that's it. And the two could then bounce off of each other, and of course, if you want to keep the Archer Rion thing, I'm not going to comment on it, I said I wouldn't, but if you want to keep it, have Archer then be tempted to go native in a similar manner because of his connection to her, thus giving him new insight on the relation of, I can't even remember the bad guy's name, the Malurian. Now, I don't know, this is all stuff I just came up with in the last few minutes because, like I said, I was pretty bored with this episode. But I want to say one last thing. One of the things that I like about modern television is that modern TV is unafraid to make regular cast members enter and leave a show. That sounds like a strange thing, and I'm sure from an actor's perspective and from a financial and producer executive perspective, that's a nightmare to have to keep up with and deal with. But from a purely creative perspective, that's the kind of thing that I would, frankly, expect from a television show. That there should be regulars who drift in and out of the narrative, just like any other long-form series. So, why am I bringing all this up? Why didn't Rion stay with us? Why didn't she join the crew? She obviously does not want to stay down there, and she now is burdened with the knowledge that there's this great, wonderful life that she has nothing to do with. And the best she's got is, the Vulcans will be by periodically to make sure everything's fine, which means you'll never interact with anyone again. Goodbye! Your life's changed forever. Goodbye! That's pretty dark if you think about it. That might lead its way into suicide territory. So regardless of the thing that I said I wouldn't talk about, don't you think she'd want to come with? You can't tell me they couldn't bring her up to speed since she's already intelligent and at least put her into a position where, okay, now we have another reason to go home. And I say another because I know there's a future episode coming up where it's a plot point that Enterprise needs to link back up with Earth for a couple reasons. So now we have another reason. Get Rion back home, that is to say to Earth. And now we have our first alien living, new alien that isn't a Vulcan, living full-time on Earth, which itself could be a potential thing, because in the future, even if you no longer have the actress on the screen, you could have scenes where Archer reads letters and messages from her as she's talking about acclimating to human life. Think about it. But no. Instead, we have something I'm not going to talk about. Hey, I think I did it. I think I made it the whole way through. I hope you've enjoyed my thoughts and my potential rewrites. I'm really trying not to rewrite this show, but it's so hard to. I need to fix it. I need to... I'll see you next time, guys.